This is NTD Evening News. Live from our global headquarters in New York City, here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. Hurricane Milton has unleashed heavy rain, tornadoes, and tropical storm force winds along the Florida coast as it steadily advances toward Tampa. Officials are urging millions of Floridians to evacuate in preparation for this life-threatening hurricane. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
According to the National Hurricane Center, Milton weakened slightly to a still powerful Category 3 storm Wednesday afternoon. As of late Wednesday, Milton was located 100 miles southwest of Tampa. With sustained winds of 125 miles per hour, the storm is moving northeast at 17 miles per hour. Tropical storm force winds also began lashing the coast. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis gave an update on the storm.
If you are in the path of this storm, you are most likely going to lose power. So just prepare for that.
He noted officials have delivered massive amounts of supplies such as meals, water bottles, sandbags, tarps, and generators to help local communities respond to the storm.
We've also deployed more than 11,000 feet of flood protection systems and erected them around critical infrastructure like hospitals, wastewater treatment facilities, and electric infrastructure.
DeSantis reassured residents that Florida had prepared significant fuel reserves ahead of Hurricane Milton, with supplies strategically staged and ready to be deployed as needed.
We still have on hand 1.6 million gallons of diesel and 1.1 million gallons of gasoline. There is no, right now, fuel shortage. However, demand has been extraordinarily high, and some gas stations have run out. To be able to help ameliorate that, the Florida Highway Patrol has facilitated 106 long-distance fuel tanker escorts with sirens getting through traffic.
The National Hurricane Center urged residents to complete all preparations to protect life and property, including evacuations on Wednesday morning, since conditions would worsen in the afternoon. The mayor of St. Petersburg repeated the message.
This is an extremely dangerous threat to our area, and I urge you to finish all of your preparation efforts as soon as possible. We are expecting between 8 to 12 feet of storm surge and winds up to 100 miles per hour. We anticipate that we will begin to feel the impacts from Milton in the next few hours.
Officials are urging residents to seek safety by heading to their nearest shelter.
If you live in a mobile or manufactured home and you're in this impact area, please go to a local shelter. If you rely on power for medical devices or other things, please go to a local shelter. Your home and belongings can be replaced, but you cannot.
Several evacuees shared their experiences regarding the conditions at the shelters.
I'm in an evacuation center, but there's over 1,000 people here. It's kind of scary.
I'm really happy that we get fed. That's one thing. The rooms are nice. I mean, they keep about 20 people per classroom, and that's adequate. I think they're nice.
Tornadoes were spotted in South Florida Wednesday as Hurricane Milton approached, crossing Interstate 75. The National Weather Service issued tornado watches for 20 counties, covering a large portion of Florida, including the Tampa area, the Florida Keys, and Miami-Dade County. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Historic, catastrophic, and different from other hurricanes. That's what federal officials are calling Hurricane Milton ahead of its landfall in Florida. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley joins us from the White House. Jack, what is the latest on the federal response to the hurricane?
Well, right now, federal officials are just talking about how catastrophic this hurricane will be when it makes landfall, as it hasn't even made landfall yet, but we're already seeing over a dozen tornadoes in the west coast of Florida. President Biden just moments ago said that this storm could be the worst and most destructive storm that we've seen in over a century. Here he is on the federal response efforts. Watch.
We've already approved emergency declarations for Florida. We have thousands of federal personnel on the ground. We've staged and are ready to go. We have 20 million meals, 40 million liters of water.
Florida officials and FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which is federally run, that is providing supplemental help. But Milton has moved from a Category 5 to Category 4, but officials say not to take this too seriously. Those words, as a downgrade doesn't necessarily mean less destruction. It just means less wind. The impacts of the storm, they say, will still be catastrophic. FEMA has already issued about $344 million in direct assistance just for Hurricane Helene to individuals who suffered from that. Now, over 8,000 federal personnel are deployed, and they're still stretched thin. 1,200 search and rescue personnel are already in Florida pre-landfall. Now, Milton will enter the west coast of Florida, make its way over Orlando, and then leave the east coast, and it will still be a hurricane. It will not downgrade to a tropical storm, which is unusual in that case. Over 20 million people across the state are under hurricane alerts, and this comes after President Biden rearranged his schedule for this. He was set to head over to Angola and Germany this weekend, and he changed his mind. He canceled his trip, postponed it rather, without a definite date yet. He says he plans to oversee the hurricane from the White House. Tiff?
All right, Jack, thank you for that update. With just 27 days left before the election, former President Trump vows to win the key swing state of Pennsylvania while announcing a rally in the deep blue state of New York. It comes as Trump and Vice President Harris are taking aim at each other over the administration's hurricane response. NTD's Iris Tao has more from Trump's rally in Scranton, Pennsylvania.
Here in President Biden's hometown of Scranton, Pennsylvania, former President Trump urges voters here to vote early and also vows to win Pennsylvania, this biggest battleground prize, with 19 electoral votes. In an appeal to voters here, Trump vows to lower their energy prices by expanding oil drilling and also to cut taxes by eliminating tax on tips, tax on overtime pay, and tax on Social Security.
No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security benefits for our great seniors.
But now, with just 27 days before the election, Trump is notably spending resources and time in states in addition to traditional battleground states. Trump announced at his Scranton rally that he will be campaigning at Madison Square Garden in New York later this month, and his campaign confirmed to our media group that that rally will happen on October 27th, just 9 days before the November election.
We're going to make a play for New York. Hasn't been done in a long time. The migrants have taken over Madison Avenue. They've taken over Fifth Avenue. They've taken over the parks. The kids can't play Little League. You know, it sounds like a trivial thing. It's a big deal when you have a son that's a Little League player and he can't play.
And in addition to New York, Trump's also vowing to, quote, make a play for other blue states like Minnesota, New Jersey, and New Mexico. And this weekend, he's even set to rally in California. Meanwhile, as two hurricanes hit the U.S., both presidential candidates are taking aim at each other over hurricane response. And Trump, at his Scranton rally, accused the administration of spending much-needed FEMA money on illegal immigrants.
They had no money. You know where they gave the money? To illegal immigrants coming in.
While Vice President Kamala Harris on Tuesday accused Trump of spreading what she calls misinformation.
It is unconscionable, frankly, that anyone who would consider themselves a leader would mislead desperate people to the point that those desperate people would not receive the aid to which they are entitled.
And next up, Trump is holding another rally in Reading, Pennsylvania tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And that's before he heads to Aurora, Colorado on Friday for a rally in another non-swing state. Reporting from Scranton, Pennsylvania, Iris Tao, NTD News.
Vice President Kamala Harris joined President Biden for updates on Hurricane Milton. She also released a statement warning against price gouging during the emergency. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
Less than 14
President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris received a briefing on Hurricanes Helene and Milton on Wednesday. Harris joined the meeting virtually from New York.
And in the hours and days ahead, President Biden and I and our administration will continue to do everything we can to protect the people who have been in the path of this storm. And once the storm has passed, we will be there to help folks recover and rebuild.
One of the big messages was reminding people that even though Milton was downgraded to a Category 4, it is still dangerous. Biden and Harris encouraged people to listen to local officials' warnings and get to a safe location.
Already, we have sent more than 1,000 federal personnel to be on the ground in Florida to assist with what needs to happen in the state to prepare for this hurricane, and we will continue to scale up those efforts.
The vice president's office also released a statement warning against price gouging during the hurricanes. It says any company or individual that tries to exploit Americans in an emergency should know that the administration is monitoring for allegations of fraud and price gouging and will hold those taking advantage of the situation accountable. And with the election 27 days away, Harris continued her media blitz this week. She appeared on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert and The Howard Stern Show on Tuesday. Earlier in the week, she was on Call Her Daddy, The View, and 60 Minutes. The interview getting the most attention so far has been Harris's 60 Minutes appearance. The Trump campaign is demanding that the show release the unedited transcript. His campaign alleged that one of Harris's answers was edited and shortened. A statement from the Trump campaign included a link that showed two different versions of Harris giving an answer to a question about Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Trump also posted on social media that the show did this multiple times and alleges that they were making an effort to, quote, make her look more presidential. 60 Minutes has not yet responded to the demand. After the vice president received updates on Hurricane Milton, she left New York City for Las Vegas, where she is scheduled to participate in a town hall on Thursday. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
Joining us now at the Election Data Hub is NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, was today marking the first day of early in-person voting in the battleground state of Arizona? How are Trump and Harris doing in the polls?
I'm glad you asked, Tiff. Now, Biden narrowly won this state 4 years ago by just 12,000 votes. Let's take a look at a recent Suffolk poll here. This is dated September 26, 2024. As you can see, Trump here with a 6-point advantage over Kamala Harris. Now, for comparison's sake, let's use the same pollster going back 4 years to October 2 through 2020, so nearly exactly 4 years, and Biden with a 4-point lead over Donald Trump. So altogether now, that is a 10-point swing in favor of Donald Trump in Arizona. Now, taking a closer look at this, let's break this down by gender. First, starting with the Arizona male voters here. Now, in 2020, Trump, actually not surprisingly, had an 8-point advantage over Biden. He seems to do a lot better with the men. 4 years later, though, Biden out, Harris is in, and that lead goes to 17. So there's a 9-point swing here in favor of Donald Trump. Now, of course, that begs the question, what about the women? Well, let's take a look here. Arizona female voters 2020, Biden did much better here, a 15-point advantage over Donald Trump. 4 years later, Biden is out, Kamala Harris is in, and she's really focused on that female vote, with abortion being a very prominent message in her campaign. So what's it done for her? Let's take a look here. She's actually dropped 7 points from where Biden was at. Meanwhile, Trump has actually picked up 3 points here. So that's a 10-point swing here for Donald Trump among female voters in Arizona, which begs the question, what are the top voter issues for female voters in Arizona? Well, let's take a look here. Top voter issues, this is according to the same pollster here, dated September 26. Number one, not surprising, it is the economy. Immigration, somewhat surprising that this is number 2. Meanwhile, abortion now down at number 3 and bringing the country together here at number 4. Now, of course, there's still 27 days left until the election. The Harris campaign, is putting a big effort still into the state of Arizona. Let's take a look here. This week alone, her entire campaign, now that includes Walz, that includes Jill Biden, that includes her husband, attending more than 200 events in Arizona. Let's look at the spending here as well. Arizona ad spend since August 1st, Kamala Harris in the state of Arizona, 61 million. Donald Trump here at 47 million. So she's putting a big effort in. She does have a bit of an uphill climb if she is going to catch Donald Trump here, according to the polls. So Tiff, that's where we're at in Arizona. Back to you at the desk.
Israel reports killing terrorists in other countries while also facing a terrorist attack within its own borders. Meanwhile, Israel's prime minister spoke with President Biden about Israel's potential attack on Iran. NTD's Jason Perry has the story.
On Wednesday, Israeli forces released drone footage of a Hezbollah commander in Lebanon wearing camouflage and trying to evade detection. Israeli troops looked on as one soldier controlled the drone with a remote device. Then an Israeli airstrike killed the terrorist. Israel also released this video of another Hezbollah terrorist in uniform trying to stay undetected, while an Israeli soldier followed him with a drone. Then that terrorist was killed as well. And in other parts of Lebanon, a video posted on social media shows what appears to be Israeli troops raising their flag in a Lebanese village as they continue their ground offensive into the country. However, Hezbollah terrorists on Wednesday launched another major rocket attack on northern Israel, killing 2 people and causing a building to catch fire.
2 residents went to walk, it seems with their dog, and they were hurt by a direct hit. I turn to you, the residents of Kiryat Shmona. Everyone who doesn't need to be in the city, don't be here.
And in central Israel, 6 people were wounded when a terrorist began stabbing people. Police say they shot and, quote, neutralized the terrorist. Over the years, Palestinians have conducted similar stabbing attacks and also car ramming attacks against Israelis. And in the West Bank on Wednesday, Israeli forces killed 5 Palestinian terrorists, according to Israeli police. Palestinian state-run media said that Israeli special forces opened fire on a vehicle that the men were traveling in. Also on Wednesday, Israel reported striking and killing a Hezbollah terrorist in Syria. Israeli forces said he was an intelligence operative for the group. In another development, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke with President Biden on Wednesday about Israel's potential attack on Iran. The White House said the talk lasted about 30 minutes and that it was direct and productive. Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said on Wednesday that their attack on Iran will be lethal, precise, and surprising. Jason Perry, NTD News.
The meeting on Ukraine at Ramstein Air Base in Germany now definitely postponed. That's after President Biden announced he won't attend. But Kyiv says it's still counting on Biden's leadership. NTD's international correspondent, Arian Pazdar, has the Ukraine update.
We are counting on President Biden's leadership.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Wednesday, saying the US, together with Europe, can help Ukraine end the conflict in the near future.
The situation on the battlefield creates an opportunity to make this choice, a choice for decisive action to end the war, no later than in 2025.
But the situation on the battlefield doesn't look too good for Ukraine. Russia has won multiple battles along the front lines recently. Just last week, Ukraine lost more than 350 troops within 24 hours in Russia's Kursk region alone, which Zelensky acknowledged at the time. On Wednesday, he once again advocated for what he calls a victory plan.
For us, this is a victory plan. For each of your countries, it's a plan for reliable stability.
Zelensky was scheduled to introduce the plan at a meeting at Ramstein Air Base in Germany. But the meeting was postponed on Wednesday after President Biden said he won't attend due to Hurricane Milton, saying he's needed in the US. At the European Parliament, meanwhile, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban addressed lawmakers talking about Ukraine. That's when they started singing Bella Ciao, a song of the Italian resistance from the Second World War. Although an old song, it gained popularity in Europe in recent years because of a TV series called Money Heist. Orban accused European lawmakers of hypocrisy for buying Russian gas via Turkey while supporting Ukraine at the same time.
In 2023, you Westerners bought 44% more Russian oil than a year earlier.
Hungary is currently holding the EU's rotating presidency. Some criticize the country for being close to Russia. The president of the European Commission suggested that Orban is blaming Ukraine for Russia's invasion.
Would they ever blame the Hungarians for the Soviet invasion in 1956? Would they ever blame the Czechs or Slovaks for the Soviet repression of 1968?
She suggested that Ukraine shouldn't surrender to Russia. A day earlier, Orban said that Ukraine can't win the conflict, advising Kyiv to close a ceasefire deal instead. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
During the lame duck session of Congress, lawmakers will have to pass the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2025. The House, the Senate, and the Pentagon are at odds over priorities for defense spending. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has more on this story.
Congress has yet to approve a defense budget for fiscal year 2025. The House of Representatives is proposing $833 billion, while the Senate is suggesting $911 billion in defense spending. When Congress reconvenes in November, lawmakers will have to pass both the appropriation bill for defense spending in fiscal year 2025 and the National Defense Authorization Act, which is the bill outlining how to spend those close to $900 billion.
For the first time in decades, the bill before us today carries a different short title. It is the Service Member Quality of Life Improvement and National Defense Authorization Act. We did that to underscore the tremendous gains this bill makes toward improving the quality of life for all of our service members and their families.
The House Armed Services Committee version of the NDAA passed with 57 votes in favor and only 1 against. But when this bill got to the House floor, it passed through party lines with 196 Democrats opposing it.
We need to be able to access all the talent in this country, not just white men. Okay, we need to recruit women. We need to recruit from communities of color. We need to recruit from the LGBT community. That is crucial to making sure we have the talent we need.
Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin also opposes the House's version of the National Defense Authorization Act. According to Secretary Austin, if left unaddressed, certain provisions in the House passed or Senate proposed bills will substantially impact the department's ability to accomplish our strategic goals. The Pentagon also opposes the 19% pay increase for junior officers, arguing it cuts into the gap between junior and senior officers, and has requested to build 1, not 2 Virginia-class submarines in fiscal year 2025, something Senate Democrats oppose.
Russia and China are trending in the opposite direction. They're building more, they're developing more and more advanced submarines. The decision to fund the production of just 1 Virginia-class submarine seems highly alarming.
Senate and House Democrats oppose the House's version of the National Defense Authorization Act as it prohibits funding for service members to access abortion and other DEI policies. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Commercial airplane maker Boeing has withdrawn an offer to 33,000 striking workers. NTD's David Lamb has more.
Boeing's offer would have given 30% raises over 4 years to the striking workers, but the aviation company withdrew the offer after talks fell through. The manufacturer said it had boosted its offer for union workers for take-home pay and retirement benefits during 2 days of negotiations. Boeing said the union didn't seriously consider the proposal. The company stated, instead, the union made non-negotiable demands far in excess of what can be accepted if we are to remain competitive as a business. The union said its members rejected Boeing's offer overwhelmingly, saying, "Your negotiating committee attempted to address multiple priorities that could have led to an offer we could bring to a vote, but the company wasn't willing to move in our direction." In September, the union complained that Boeing had publicized its latest offer to 33,000 striking workers without first bargaining with negotiators.
The sense of not respecting our negotiating team to do that and bypass them and trying to get directly to the members, that's not how it should be done, right?
I'm not going to think about anything on the word of mouth or on a handshake. We want it in writing. We need to review, because something that's not talked about is all the fine print, right? We need to look at what's been scratched out or what's been changed. It's all there. But when they just throw out this what might look good to the public.
The first proposal included 25% raises, but the union originally demanded 40% over 4 years. The strike is stretching on as Boeing deals with multiple other issues. It has shut down production of 3 of its models. S&P estimates that Boeing will lose around $1 billion a month due to costs associated with the strike. David Lamb, NTD News.
Former President Trump held one of his 2 Pennsylvania rallies in Scranton today, the hometown of President Biden. This as the battle for the Keystone State intensifies. With just 4 weeks before Election Day, the heart of that battle is over Erie County, a historically must-win county in the must-win state. Joining us now to discuss this and how the candidates are faring is political strategist and attorney Dante Mills. Dante, thank you so much for joining us. Great to see you again. Now to begin, Trump is back in Pennsylvania, your home state, today, after just being there over the weekend. It is. Now, Vice President Kamala Harris was also campaigning there last month. Give us a sense of just how crucial this state is to both parties. Will Pennsylvania decide this election?
It will, and that's not just, the pundits and people saying that. You see that in the campaigns. The focus that they have on Pennsylvania right now is unmatched. There are a couple of other states that they're spending a lot of time: Wisconsin, North Carolina, which is a newer battleground state, Nevada. There's some other states, but Pennsylvania is getting the bulk of attention, and rightfully so, because it's a large delegate base, and also it's really up in the air right now, and anything could make a difference. So you see Vice President Harris is focusing on the ground game. They have a lot of money that they raised there. There's a lot of excitement. And when you have excitement, that means volunteers. And one thing in Pennsylvania, she's getting a lot of volunteers that's actually knocking door to door and reaching out to people, trying to motivate them to go vote. Former President Trump, on the other hand, is really banking on getting voters who don't actually usually show up to vote by, I don't want to say scaring them into going to the polls, but by letting them know what he believes will happen if they don't and Vice President Harris wins. He's talking about immigration. He's talking about the impact on the economy and things like that if they don't show up. So he's trying to motivate those people who would normally sit home to say, hey, you can't sit home right now because there's going to be a problem in America if you do.
And if a candidate doesn't win Pennsylvania, is there a pathway to victory without that state? What would that look like?
I don't know if there is, and I'll tell you, not because Pennsylvania is a deciding factor, but because if you lose Pennsylvania, there's other states that's naturally going to go along with it. You would believe that Wisconsin kind of falls the same way Pennsylvania does and things like that. So if you lose Pennsylvania, essentially, especially for Vice President Harris, if she loses Pennsylvania, she would have to run the table on all of those other swing states. And I don't know if that's possible. If she can't get those rural voters in Pennsylvania, then she's not likely to win North Carolina. She's not likely to win those other states, that are similar in the Rust Belt. And that's where you get the indicator that Pennsylvania brings, not just to get the delegates, but it gives you a glimpse of what these voters, how they see these candidates and who's going to be behind these candidates supporting them. So I think making a push in Pennsylvania is very important. I like to see my home state in the spotlight. I'm interested to see how it turns out. I know there's a lot of people motivated in that state. It's a lot of buzz around it. And I think politics and people being involved is a great thing. So this is good for the country, starting with and leading with the great state of Pennsylvania.
And speaking of indicators, it's not just the whole state. Erie County is a must-win. The county was a bellwether for voting in the winning presidential candidate in the last 4 elections. With both Trump and Harris campaigns doubling down their get out and vote efforts as well as ads, how well do you see each campaign doing in terms of ad spending and door knocking in Erie County?
Well, Vice President Harris I think she's leading the charge with money raised, ad spending. But I think former President Trump is leading the charge in motivation and getting to people and making them feel like they have to get out there and vote or, there's going to be a problem. He's leading the charge in that regard. One thing I will note, and this is just being on the ground myself in Pennsylvania and dealing with a lot of my direct contacts there, those 2 campaigns, the people involved in those campaigns, they're butting heads a lot because it's not a lot of space. Erie County is not huge. And it's important, and they're there a lot. So those people are seeing each other often. They're getting into confrontations. It's a lot at stake in that county, and people know it.
Now, when it comes to Erie County, the election generally comes down to just a handful of votes. For example, in 2020, Biden won by less than 1,500 votes. In 2016, Trump won with less than 2,000. Now, given those slim margins, many are calling this election consequential. Is there a sense there's more enthusiasm for voters to turn out for either candidate than in past years?
Not necessarily. I will say that Vice President Harris has more enthusiasm coming into this election than President Biden did when he was still running. But that doesn't mean that that surpasses the enthusiasm of the prior elections. We know that President Biden's enthusiasm was down, very low, and that's part of the reason why he's not in the race anymore. So just because she's running better than he is does not mean that she's outpacing the prior elections. And that get out there and vote wouldn't normally be out there, because he knows if he can convince 500 people that stayed home before to go vote for him, that may be the difference. And it's really going to come down to that small of a number. And Erie County is the predictor. So if you can pull that county in Pennsylvania, I think it goes to show who you can pull across the rest of the state. And there's a lot of attention on that county. And I'm telling you, it's going to be a small margin. So every person that they can motivate to get out there, they're trying their best, whether it's in spending ad money, knocking on doors, or just talking about what would happen if they don't get out there and vote themselves.
Speaking of pulling those votes, a new Gallup poll shows top issues for voters are divided along partisan lines. For Democrats, the top 3 issues are democracy, which Supreme Court justices candidates would pick, and abortion. For Republicans, it's the economy, immigration, national security. How do you see those issues playing out somewhere like Erie County?
Well, I think it's important. The economy is always going to be the most important. And I know that polls, we want to trust polls. We want to get some kind of indicators from polls or some direction as far as what we have to address. But the economy is always going to be the most important thing. I think Vice President Harris has really made a push, especially in Pennsylvania, to say and to highlight that former President Trump did not want to leave office, and that in order to make sure that the government is secure, you can't vote him back in there because he may not want to relinquish power. She's really pushing that hard in Pennsylvania. It resonates with people. So when they're taking a poll after they just heard that or just saw that on a commercial, they may say, you know what, I think that's important. But at the end of the day, they're going to go in that booth and say, who's going to be better for my pocket, because I have to feed my family, especially when you talk about Pennsylvania. There's counties in there like Philadelphia County that is really below that poverty line. And people are concerned about whether or not they can feed their families, whether or not they're going to have jobs that they can depend on. That's going to rule the day. So if these polls show that former President Trump is leading in that, I think that's a bad sign for Vice President Harris, because no matter who says it right now that it's important, when they go vote in that booth, that's going to be the first thing on their mind.
Dante Mills, political strategist and attorney, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
From the Howard Stern Show to Stephen Colbert, as the election now enters its final stretch, Vice President Kamala Harris is stepping up media appearances. But screen time aside, how much do voters know about her policies and achievements? NTD's Sam Wong spoke to people at the National Mall to find out.
Would you say you know full well about Harris's policy agenda?
There's not much there other than more of the same and socialism.
I like the idea that she focuses on the middle class.
Like, for example, when she talks about not taxing tips.
She changes horses midstream on a regular basis, so it's hard to say what she's for.
She keeps just going around and around in a circle and not really stating what is really truly her policy.
She's talking about building homes, what kind of numbers she has been thinking of, and initiatives and policies that will help support that.
There's a lot of word salads when you try to find out what those policies are.
Throughout Harris's political career, what are some of her biggest political achievements or accomplishments?
I can't name one.
I have a blank look on my face, don't I?
She is a decent person, and she's a former senator and former prosecutor.
Giving away money? No, I can't.
Following up on some of the criminal activities and actually doing the prosecutions rather than letting things ride.
To me, it's her legacy. She come from a single family. She become the Secretary of State. She become Vice President.
I think that the way she has really focused on women's health and getting in there and getting policy initiated.
I don't think she has accomplished what is beneficial to us as a nation and for what is right in the sight of every American, Democratic and Republican.
3 scientists won the 2024 Nobel Prize in Chemistry today for their work on the structure of proteins. The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences said half the prize was awarded to U.S. scientist David Baker. The other half was shared by U.S. scientist John Jumper and British scientist Demis Hassabis. Hassabis and Jumper used artificial intelligence to predict the structure of almost all known proteins, while Baker created entirely new proteins. The prize is widely regarded as among the most prestigious in the scientific world. It is worth $1.1 million. The Tropicana Las Vegas is a legendary hotel and casino in Las Vegas. The building was imploded in the early hours today to make way for a future baseball stadium. The Tropicana Las Vegas vice president and general manager paid tribute to his staff and team members ahead of the implosion.
I want to take a moment to honor the thousands of people who made the place what it is, the team members. The Tropicana didn't just stand on the strip because of its architecture, it stood because of the people. I had the privilege of working with many of you over the last 15 years, and it's something I'll never forget.
The hotel and casino has more than 14,000 rooms and was built in 1957. Its demolition was preceded by a ceremony. Fireworks and drone displays lit up the sky during the event. The Department of Justice considers breaking up Google, accusing the tech giant of having an illegal monopoly for over a decade. Here's the story.
The Department of Justice has indicated it's considering breaking up Google. In a filing, DOJ says Google's illegal monopoly in search and advertising has resulted in pernicious harms for over a decade. It says Google's practices have made it difficult to compete with.
What's really important in this decision is they're tackling the search business, where Google and Alphabet makes the bulk of their money.
Tech expert Ashley Monraj says this could have a major impact on Google's revenue, possibly forcing Google to license searching technology and let others access search data. Monraj says Google's amalgamation of different services gives advertisers a relatively easy and effective time. In a potential breakup scenario, advertisers could have to use many more third parties.
I'm not sure that if we do get sub-services or smaller services, they would be as widely available and functional as Google Ad Service and different Google services were.
The DOJ is exploring a number of remedies to what it calls Google's monopoly. Google says, quote, DOJ's radical and sweeping proposals risk hurting consumers, businesses, and developers. It says they hurt user privacy, innovation, advertising effectiveness, and Google applications themselves. Google can appeal the verdict of any lawsuit, leading to a lengthy years-long court battle.
The success of one Netflix show has given a boost to tourism in the French capital. The show Emily in Paris has inspired visitors from across the globe to take a closer look at Paris. NTD's international correspondent David Vives has the story.
The Alexander III Bridge is known for its iconic 19th century ornaments and sculptures. It is also notable because a girl named Emily Cooper from the Netflix show Emily in Paris happened to be here. The show depicts the tale of a young American navigating the world of Parisian luxury. It ranked in the Netflix Global Top 10 when it premiered in August.
Yeah, I've seen the show and I liked it very much. It's my favorite, and my boyfriend's too. Because of the scene, we are here.
Following the trail of Emily Cooper's has recently inspired many visitors to the French capital. According to a survey from the National Center of Cinema, 38% of tourists come to Paris to see in real life the location visited by the Netflix show's actress. The Place de l'Estrapade, where the character from the show lives, has become a pilgrimage destination for fans. Small reenactments rituals are being followed. Ringing at the building door, ordering a croissant, pain au chocolat or coffee to the Boulangerie Moderne, taking selfies in front of the fountain and near the local restaurant.
It's such an amazing show. It makes me happy to watch, and I like watching it with my dad because we get to laugh together, and all the characters are great and the outfits are great, and I'm ready to get casted. I find it very romantic here, and the show really portrays all the relationships that can be made in this place.
The iconic French restaurant owned by the character Gabrielle in the show has also gained great success since the series aired. No Gabrielle can be found here, but an Italian chef, the proud owner of Terra Nera for 20 years, runs the place.
What changed after the show is that we now see people coming from all over the world. We can tell the series has been released in 93 countries.
There's even a meal on the menu named after Emily's first meal here.
In the series, the two companions in the restaurant order a fillet of beef, so we decided to do the same thing, with a Modena vinegar sauce. Now you can enjoy a really good fillet of beef when you come to Terra Nera.
In general, cinema has greatly boosted tourism in the French capital, with 86% of visitors stating they've seen films or series about France. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.